The Flyover Libertarian, Episode 17. Well, I'm here today with normaljeans. He's an expert in agorism.
Yeah, definitely not an expert.
Our resident
This is all
expert.
a pretty, yeah, I can, maybe your resident expert, but not a capital R resident expert.
You know how some actors do method acting? Well, I'm doing method interviewing where my audience doesn't know what agorism is, and neither do I. So could you tell me what agorism is?
I guess, and I'm not what I really like about agorism or agorism, however you want to say it, is it is very philosophical, but I think agorism, it forces you to get out of the philosophical and get you into, like, how do you actually take some of these libertarian, anarcho-capitalist principles and implement them into everyday life to get you out of the ivory tower of political philosophy, and how do you actually live your life freely? So agorism is a philosophy of, hey, how do I live my life freely? How do I engage in voluntary transactions? And how do I do as much as possible in my everyday life outside the bounds of giving more of the state my money? How do I do things in a way that does not feed the war machine? How do I do things that does not increase the tax base that funds the government's boot on my neck? That's at least how I think about it, and like that's why I laughed when you called me an expert, because 2020 brought me into. I mean, you and I had talked about this. Like, I went from libertarian, like minarchist, to anarcho-capitalist, and then I transitioned into agorism because I was really frustrated with okay, I like anarcho-capitalism, but how do I actually, like, how does that change my life? Because
there?
so much of it is based on, so much of it is based on, well, if the government didn't do this, then life would be better, which is totally true. But agorism, I like it because it forces me to think, if I do this, then things will be better. And so it's, living a life with voluntary transactions. You know, there's the black market side of things, and then there's the gray market side of things. But, agorism on a really simplistic level could be something as easy as you grow tomatoes in your backyard and your neighbor grows lettuce. And so you want lettuce and your neighbor wants tomatoes, so you trade however you guys deem worthy your produce, so that you both get what you need. And you're not having to go to a store. You're not having to go to a government, sanctioned store or supply chain to receive the items that you need.
Sweet. So is it explicitly taking out the currency, or is it just a matter of eliminating a middleman? Or is it just a matter of subverting the system? So maybe you do that with a currency, but the whole point is that you're subverting a system?
Yeah, I think it's both things, right? So you, like, in agorism is this concept of counter economics, because, every time you go to a store and you're in a place that has a sales tax, well, you are contributing to the state, whether it's you're here where I live, they just increased the tax, the sales tax, last year. They increased it, and so anytime I go to the store and I buy something in my city, I am giving money to the state, which I would say it forces me to engage in relationships and transactions that I don't agree with. So if I can limit the amount of money that I give them, then I see that as a win, because that keeps me less reliant on the state, and that also gives them less money to unjustly imprison people or write more tickets because they can't, afford more police cars. Like, obviously, I don't make a ton of money, so I'm not purchasing a ton, so I'm not funding full police cars. I'm not funding full a prison cell. But agorism, it forces me to think through, how can I limit the amount of money that I give the government? And so a lot of people have formed these, communities. And it sometimes, when I first heard about it, I was like, that sounds like straight up communism. But these people, they've created these little communities, these pockets of people who voluntarily interact with one another, and they use cryptocurrency to do their transactions. So I'm, building a chicken coop, so I need chicken wire, I need 2x4s, I need some corrugated sheet metal. And so instead of going to a big box store, I'm going to go to the guy who he comes across these things and stores them so he can use them to transact with people. And so I send him some Bitcoin, or I send him some Ethereum or some Monero, and that is not being taxed. So it's a gray market system. You have things like, the Silk Road, which was, definitely a black market system, where people were, using cryptocurrency. They were stepping out of the bounds of the law to, get items that they wanted, whether they were, legal or not legal, or in some people's eyes, moral or immoral. They were not operating within the normal market system where things were tracked, where things were taxed, where things were regulated. So yeah, people, and I'm really new to the cryptocurrency game, so I've not really done much with that. But I'm trying just to day by day, week by week, think through ways that I can limit the amount of money that I contribute to the U.S. government. I'm still going to pay my income taxes because I don't want the IRS and cops to come and murder me in my sleep and then leave my kids and my wife without a husband and a father. So I'm still paying my taxes.
Probably a good call. Yeah, I could see how cryptocurrency is a great combination with Agorism, for sure.
Yeah, there's some cool communities. I know, like up in New Hampshire with the Free State Project, there are a lot of people who practice this model. There's some communities in Austin, communities in California. Where they try to do as little as possible with the U.S. dollar and do as much as possible with cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, that's great, and I love it, and I wish I could be more that way. It's just so challenging to, it's just so challenging because if you're practicing agorism, you're not using curbside pickup. You're not using, your Menards rebate card.
I really spent all last year, because honestly, I did not. It was probably August whenever I stumbled upon Agorism. I had my third child and was up late at night, so I found some podcast, Free Man Beyond the Wall, and Sal the Agorist. I stumbled upon those two guys, and they started to flesh out these things. And there's another guy named he does Jack Spirko. He does the Survivalist podcast, and all three of these guys at different levels practice agorism. So Sal the Agorist, he has a 3D printing machine web store, and he prints all sorts of things. He prints guns, he prints replacement parts. Jack Spirko, he does aquaponics. He raises ducks, raises chickens, has a bunch of animals, grows his own food, hunts, all this stuff. And then Pete Quinones from the Free Man Beyond the Wall podcast, he works a day job, but is really pushing out the message of agorism. So I was thinking, how can me with my family in an urban context, how can I go about practicing things on a daily level? And so, so it's been something as simple as I gave some ammunition to someone, and they gave me a bunch of beef, frozen beef. So that was like a transaction. I gave someone a product, and they gave me a product in return that I, very much enjoyed and used, nourished my family with it. But as I'm planning for this year, I, drawing up plans to grow various vegetables that I know that I can grow on my property. And I'm creating a community and a network of people who I know already garden, so I'm gaining information from them, but I'm also saying, hey, what are you growing? Okay, cool, that's awesome. Here's what I'm going to grow. Hey, let's trade this stuff instead of having all this produce that goes to waste because it gets moldy or it gets wilted. Let's trade so we don't have to go to the store as much. Let's do that. Looking at things like, hey, I'm going to go and try to find as much as I possibly can on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist rather than running to the store. And if I can't find it on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, I'll talk with some friends, and maybe I can trade something for some sort of supplies that I need, or a skill that I need. And instead of paying a contractor to come and fix something, I can, create some sort of exchange between me and someone that I know who has the skill to fix something. So those are like the really, really big ways that I'm, thinking about that. Also, like I live in an urban context, so I'm like, I will park several blocks away from something and walk to where I need to go downtown rather than put my coins in the meter, because I don't want to give the government any more of my money.
I connect well with Agorism because I think I'm already a very natural secondhand shopper and do-it-yourselfer and even barterer if the opportunity arises. So in some ways, I don't have to go out of my way to buy secondhand or to try to learn to do something myself. And so that part feels really natural to me. It's the parts of my life that are very focused on convenience, like just throw everything on a credit card, pay it off every month, do your curbside pickup for groceries, or those parts are the things that really need to be evaluated and ask myself, what can I do locally? And that's the other thing, is this is a design pattern. It's decentralization as a design pattern, which we have an episode on the podcast earlier about. You're investing more in your neighborhood. Like, I know a number of people around you and I that would be interested in that whole vegetable garden system, and they could benefit from it or be involved in it. I think that's really cool. You're also specializing. So the economic part of Agorism is awesome too, because you're specializing instead of just trying to grow everything in your garden. You're specializing and benefiting more from that.
I've heard it quoted that not all entrepreneurs are agorists, but all agorists are entrepreneurs, which I think is a really interesting concept. Because if you are gonna not go to seek specialist or to seek something from a big box store or seek the government's help in, then you need to take the initiative and figure out ways that you can create more revenue streams for yourself, or more streams of resources for yourself. And so you couple that with something I think is another thing that's awesome about Agorism is that there's this community aspect to where you need to realize that you can't do it all on your own, right? So you have to build a network, build a community of people. And with me being as a Christian, I look at Acts 2 and I say, this is what they were doing. They were practicing agorism in the early church. They had people who were being persecuted by the Jews, by the government, and they were losing their homes or losing their livelihoods, and they were in need. And the church sacrificed and made sure that no one was in need in their community. So they were selling their possessions to provide for those in need. And so if you have this, a robust community, I do. Where I live and where I work. And so I'm thinking through, how can I maximize the community that I have? How can I invest in others? And how can I seek to build a partnership where I'm also being invested in? So whether it's, we've got, I know a lot of people who specialize in certain things. So it's like, hey, can you come over here and help me with my house project? And then I will come and do this for you. Or like I've shared this example with you. I had an old truck that broke down. I parked it on the street. Whenever the snow came, the city was giving me tickets for leaving my truck on the road. But, I thought, well, my taxes already went to fund the roads, so I should be able to park this here anyway. But apparently that was wrong. But my neighbors said, hey, you can park your truck in our driveway. We have an extra space. I was like, okay, awesome. Thank you. I said, I'll clear the sidewalks whenever it's snowed. I'll take care of your sidewalk and your little roundabout, and then also in the summer times I'm gonna mow your front yard. So that was the trade that I had with my neighbors. So that is me going out, instead of buying a spot at a storage unit to store my truck, I was able to just transact a parking spot on my neighbor's driveway for some manual labor.
Yeah, and the joke's on them because you love mowing.
Yeah,
I think we just accidentally explained
like, okay.
Competitive advantage in economics. Wow.
Yeah, because I was already mowing their front yard anyway whenever I would go out, because my neighbor hates mowing and I love mowing, so yeah, it worked out really well.
I know one of the concerns with a lot of people have with anything like this is the amount of extra like overhead effort to do a transaction when you're trying to barter or just not use one of these convenience systems that already exists in the world. Um, so I'm really interested in the idea of developing structures that make it easier to practice agorism and just make it more natural. So I'm picturing stuff like a cooperative, like if you had a bunch of people in a neighborhood that had uh, a gardening system going where this person grows this thing, this other person grows this other thing. Um, have you read much about those? Like, what options are there to make this easier besides just bartering and negotiating a barter for everything you want to trade individually?
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest key, and that's really where the depth of my knowledge runs out. As I said earlier, like this is new to me, and crypto's new to me. But I think that's why that entrepreneurial spirit is so important with agorism. And I don't naturally have an entrepreneurial spirit. I'm very risk adverse, and so I don't want to, try to step out on some venture and then fall flat on my face. So like this is really challenging for me. But yeah, I think the collectively working together to where it's, okay, hey, this is the problem in our neighborhood, and we could outsource this to the government, but instead of outsourcing it to the government, we're going to take care of it ourselves. Or like, like the one, libertarians love to praise Domino's for fixing potholes. Like there was an issue, and they're like, our drivers' pizzas are getting jacked up by these potholes. So tell us where potholes are in your neighborhood, and if your city wins, then we're going to come and fill potholes in your city and on your street. So yeah, that's really where my thinking comes to an end, because I'm just, one, not that smart, and two, like this is all fairly new to me. But yeah, I think the figuring out of the transactions, like that's something that, is determined, between the two parties, and so it really is like a new business agreement each time, unless, it's, hey, I've got chickens and I'm producing eggs year round. What do you want? I can provide you with eggs every week. What can you provide me with in return for these eggs? And so maybe, you've got a goat that you can milk, or maybe you live in a rural area and you can, do business with farmers, instead of going to the grocery store. So I'm still, just brainstorming about this. And so as I think about the community that I'm involved in, how can I, build something to bring efficiency into a bartering system or in a good for good system?
No, that's actually a really good point. The idea of bartering a continuous flow of goods as opposed to just a one-time transaction, that's huge, because you see this with sites like Patreon, where a creator can try and create and sell individual pieces of content, and their income is just going to be super volatile and unpredictable. But with Patreon, that people have actually been able to make that their full-time job, because they know how much they're getting. Same way with supporting small farmers and ranchers. If you join one of these subscription models for them, they know how much money they're getting. You can get something that you're going to buy regularly anyway, and then the whole system is just better off because of that. Instead of trying to remember, oh, I want to buy local grass-fed beef every time you go to the grocery store. You just set it up on a subscription and just set it and forget it.
Yeah, and with, especially if you're doing these things outside of the bounds of the U.S. dollar, you're not having to factor in inflation or deflation into your transactions with people. So that's a plus if you're doing good for good. But I think what I love right now is that people have this huge distaste for gigantic corporations as a result of 2020, because now people have seen how the government loves to prop up huge corporations, and big box chain stores, but does not care about the independent farmer, or doesn't care about the mom and pop restaurant, or doesn't care about the local independent grocery store. So I think this is a really unique time for us to say, hey, let's reevaluate the way that we live our lives. We've been so habituated into convenience and ease, and I love Amazon Prime, but I'm at that point where I'm like, I keep funding the thing that I hate. I keep outsourcing my purchases to this organization that loved 2020. They loved being able to grow their business by billions of dollars and squelch out the small businesses. So I think this is a really unique time for us to be like, okay, who's our local farmer? Is there a local family-run farm that I can support? Like, can I go buy a pig directly from that farmer, take it to someone to have it slaughtered and butchered and processed, and instead of going to Walmart or instead of going to the big regional grocery store, can I support these two small businesses directly?
Yeah, absolutely. I've tried to wean myself off of Amazon too. It's tough. I think I got down to Target instead, but it's not much better really in the scheme of things.
I know. I've spent $120 on Amazon the past 2 days on things that I needed that were, because like this is where the capitalist in me is like, okay, well I can get it off of Amazon faster and cheaper than driving to a store here. So out of convenience and out of saving money, I'm going to choose this.
Yeah, if I wanted to create some takeaways from this, I'm starting to formulate them in my head. I'm starting to think of grocery items that we buy regularly that they're at least like worth looking into, evaluating how much more would it be if I bought this locally on a subscription basis, and do I know a farmer that produces this, and could I barter them or give them cryptocurrency for this?
Because I've just gotten to the point of going from basically being a boomer neocon for my whole life to seeing the horrors of war, the horrors of our justice system, the horrors of oppression of poorer people at the hands of the government. I'm like, well, why do I want to give them as much money as I possibly can? Like, and not just thinking about what's the least amount of money I can give the government whenever it comes to my tax deductions. That's a great place to start. But how in other nooks and crannies of my life can I not contribute to, as Dave Smith always talks about and Scott Horton always talk about, of bombing children and starving children in Yemen? Like, where's an area I could give one less dollar to that? But yeah, the frustrating thing is that even if you give them less money, they'll just print more money and make up more money and say it's real and still, continue their war campaigns.
Yeah, that's another reason that Agorism and cryptocurrency or a non-inflationary cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, I think they go hand in hand even better because of that. Because
yes.
if you do somehow manage to stop giving them a ton of money through taxation, they will just print it, because as long as the dollar is the U.S., as long as the dollar is the world's reserve currency, they can just print more and take it from everyone equally.
Yep. And the more they print, when they print more money and make it out of, take it from, the unicorn farts and make more money, that's essentially a way of them taxing you even more, because they're devaluing the money you have in your bank account. They're devaluing the money you have in your wallet. So they're taking money from you by creating more money. And so, what's the best way that you can, take what you have and maximize its value? Is it just keeping, a bunch of cash under your mattress, or are there things that you can buy that you can trade someone else for? So like, it would have been really awesome to, at the beginning of 2020, like January 2020, to have bought a bunch of Clorox wipes and hand sanitizers and N95 masks that you could have traded or sold. Because those were things that were needed. Or, I'm looking back, I'm like, man, I really should have got into Bitcoin whenever a crazy friend of mine told me about it, when Bitcoin was nothing, and I could have taken some money and bought whole Bitcoins and now had a bunch more money to use for some purchases. So
that's a good segue into an episode idea I had for the future regarding kind of financial management for the liberty-minded people out there. That every dollar you keep in a bank account that's not earning interest or very much interest, that's essentially being taxed at whatever the inflation rate is. So if you put that in the stock market, you might earn 6 or 7%, and then minus whatever the inflation rate is, like 2%. Or better, you put that in real estate, and again, you'll be earning whatever your local real estate is appreciating at minus whatever the inflation rate is. Or someday if you can sell that for Bitcoin, then the inflation rate doesn't matter. But I think that's another consideration, is that it's not only how you're spending your money, but where you're keeping your wealth should be a consideration of agorism, because that's really what the system is feeding on.
At the end of the day, there's going to be somebody who's going to oppress you, whether it's a government or a neighbor or a foreign government. So we're not thinking we can bring utopia into existence by force. So how do we live peacefully with one another and try to make our community a little bit more like heaven before Jesus returns?
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really one of the best witnesses too for the Christian, is to be in excellent community with each other, and agorism would be an awesome expression of that.
I would just end with, agorism is a great way to counter the coercion of the state by opting out of some of the state's systems that they want to force you into. So if you can choose some areas where you don't have to operate in those systems, then you're going to be advancing liberty in your own life and inspiring others to advance liberty in their own lives.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, this has been a conversation with Normal Jeans. He is a private citizen that works at None of Your Business. His website is He Doesn't Have One. His Twitter handle is Go Take a Hike. Thank you. Have a good night. Well, to kick things off, I'm drinking my Ezra Brooks that I shared a bottle with you. Are you drinking Ezra Brooks by any chance? That store pick we got was pretty good.
I'm currently drinking a... it was delicious. I'm drinking a Twist of Lime Topo Chico right now.
Close. Okay. Well, I find that if I drink bourbon, I'm a better interviewer. So, cheers.
I should have pre-gamed.
It's good. It's needs a drop of water. It's 107 proof, so needs a drop of water, but then that caramel shines right through. The Flyover Libertarian podcast, sponsored by Ezra Brooks.